All right, starting to go live. Just about ready. All right, we are live.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Environment Subcommittee. We have 4 bills on our agenda. Since HB 245 is probably going to require the more extended discussion, I'm going to put that last. And then we'll start with HB 78, then go to just discussion of 305, then 457, and then House Bill 245. So with that, Kristen, you want to discuss HB 78, and I assume that appropriations is voted favorably on this
Yeah,
bill.
and they adopted a couple of amendments as well. So,
Okay.
so like as Delegate Stein indicated, it's a jointly assigned bill, and ENT is secondary. The bill's making changes to the governance and administrative requirements of MES. I guess I'll do a quick overview of the bill, and then I'll discuss appropriations amendments. So there's changes are made to the board structure and governance. Well, this is where there's actually an amendment. So the bill as introduced reduced the number of board members constituting a quorum from 5 to 4. This is one of the amendments that was adopted by Appropriations Committee. They took these provisions out of the bill. We have another bill in this committee, House Bill 918, that's dealing with the same provisions. This one relates to dealing with the state treasurer's responsibilities on various boards. One of which is we have a bill that would take the state treasurer off the MES board. So that those provisions are no longer in the bill, but the bill is authorizing the secretary to delegate certain duties and responsibilities. That's similar to what the board's treasurer has that authority to delegate currently. It makes some changes to the way MES enters contracts. They're allowed to provide a proposal instead of a proposed contract when on a project, so that they don't have to deal with all of the specifics of a contract. They can just issue a proposal. For the auditing and reporting requirements, the deadlines for the required annual financial audit and annual summary report are standardized to October 31st of each year, and the bill is introduced. The appropriations amendment updates that standardized date to November 15th. There's a requirement in the bill to provide there's an existing a requirement in existing law to provide an additional audit focusing on unauthorized spending and other related requirements, and that's being repealed. That's interpreted as being a one-time requirement, and MES conducted that audit in 2022. And the annual summary report is modified to include the completed financial audit instead of a similar requirement, and certain salary information is no longer explicitly required. So just to go back to the amendments that appropriation adopted, one, they took out the quorum requirements in the bill because that's being taken care of in another bill that we'll see here at the end of the week. And then the changes to the standardized date for reporting was changed from October 31st to November 15th.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Terrassa, so you have a question, and I do want to know Jeff Tosi from MES is here in case he wants to help with any questions that folks might have. So, but Delegate Terrassa.
Yeah, just really quickly, what does proposal instead of proposed contract mean? Or did I mishear that?
So they can, so when they're providing, right now they can provide a proposed contract on a project. This would give flexibility that instead of, all of the specifics of contracts, they could have a proposal. So it wouldn't have, I don't think, every item that would be, included in a contract. It's more of a, probably a more simple proposal related to the project versus the complexities of a proposed contract. But as Delegate Stein mentioned, Jeff Tosi's here and he might be able to get a little deeper in on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
Jeff.
yeah, great.
I'm sorry, Delegate.
Nope, that's great. I'm still not, I appreciate the explanation, but I'm still confused.
Okay,
Yeah,
Jeff.
so, can you hear me? You can, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this was a request from our Assistant Attorney General. So, under, the MES statute, when a county or a municipality, I use as examples, would, they want to have somebody else instead of them doing it, operate, say, a wastewater treatment plant, or maybe a landfill. They can go out to an RFP. We are precluded from state law from responding to that RFP. However, if they request that MES provide essentially a quote, we are required to respond with a proposed contract. So we're proposing to, I feel like I'm using that word too much. We're suggesting to the legislature that we change that wording to proposal. A proposal would be like a glossy document that gives the county an understanding of what our costs would be to operate the facility, but it would not be something that would be like contractually binding. In other words, all the nitty-gritty details of what would be included in a contract would not need to be included, and then would not need to take up our Assistant Attorney General's time in developing and furnishing a full contract. So this is really just something that we wouldn't be precluded from offering the local government a contract. But in the case, that the local government just wants to know, generally what it's going to cost to do what they think they want us to do, this would allow us some flexibility. And take, our AAGs have limited resources, and they're the ones that really requested this. It would give them some flexibility to say, well, how much, to our managing director of, let's say, water, wastewater, a discussion would occur where the managing director would say, well, the town of so-and-so would like us to produce a quote for them. And then so the AAGs would say, well, how much detail do you need? Can you provide them with, a proposal, or or are they ready to go and they want a contract? So again, it's just something that gives us some flexibility rather than having to provide a contract in every scenario.
So would you, maybe, would you?
Delegate Truss, I think we lost you.
At least it wasn't me.
Delegate Terrassa? Okay, well, Delegate Ruth and hopefully Delegate Terrassa.
I think I got frozen. Hello?
Yes,
Yeah, you're back
okay,
now.
you
There
did.
you are.
Okay. Yeah, we missed your follow-up question, Delegate Terrassa.
Oh, okay, thank you. The follow-up question was, when do the details get ironed out? Like, when does it become the details of the proposal is it before they commit to going with you?
Yeah, so like what happens is, like I said, in current law, we're required to produce a proposed contract. That's very detailed. So not every single time that a local government reaches out to us do we end up operating their facility. So oftentimes what happens is they use our what should amount to be a quote for the cost for our services. They use that to compare with what responses they got in an RFP, and we never end up doing the work.
I gotcha.
So that means that the AAG spent, I don't know how many hours of time developing that proposed contract only for the local jurisdiction to really just use it as like a litmus test.
Okay, I think I understand. And then if they do go with you, then that gets ironed out in
Yes.
contract language before it's signed.
Yeah, and there's another provision in our bill that addresses that to some degree.
Okay.
If you wanted me to explain that real quickly, I
Well, you
could.
can if others want you to, but I think I'm satisfied.
Okay.
I appreciate your explanation.
You got it.
Okay, Delegate Ruth?
I think my question was answered, but so just to clarify, after the proposal, at some point, there would still be a contract if the,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
okay.
We would, there was, some audit language about some of our operations with state facilities, that we're addressing. So we have some provisions in the law that would have previously allowed us to work. MES started as a unit within the Department of Natural Resources. So some of the agreements that we have with DNR and Public Safety and Correctional Services sort of allowed us to operate their facilities without being under contract, but those issues are being addressed, and we're coming up with full agreements now. So essentially, what's happening is every time that we go into a facility to operate it, we're going to be under contract, under contractual terms for that operational capacity. It's probably
Okay.
a case of TMI there, but
Thank you.
No, it's helpful. Thank you. Delegate Ruth, you good? Okay, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is similar to the question that I actually asked at the hearing. At the very end, on page 5 of 5, where MES is asking to delete that their report shall set forth the complete operating and financial statement covering the services activities during such year, the salaries for each position of the service. I understand some of that is duplicative of the audit, but do the audits include the salaries for each position? I think this is a little bit, that section asks for more information than would be provided in your standard audit. Am I correct in that?
yeah, so the section of law that you're referring to refers to MES's annual report. The annual report is going to really go through our business activities throughout the year, including a complete, like you said, I'm reading from it now, a complete operating and financial statement covering the services activities throughout the year. The financial audit, so within that language, and I'm talking about the current law language, when we say setting forth a complete operating, well, if you forget about operating, a complete financial statement, we have a separate requirement under law right now with a separate due date under law that requires us to go through an independent financial audit. To fulfill this requirement, we have been including the independent financial audit. So you're correct in stating that the removal of the operating and financial statement covering, if you include that operating language, you're correct that it's more, we're removing language that's broader than we're adding back in. Does that make sense? You're correct in that. So we would not be technically required to include in our annual report a complete operating statement, even though that's essentially what we were doing. So if you wanted to like move the bracket so that you're only deleting financial statement so that we can kind of combine the two things. That my intention was to combine the two, the independent financial audit, and basically include that as an addendum in our annual report, which we will do every year regardless of what the law says. And then to your point on the salaries for each position of the service, why that has been included in our annual report is kind of, I have no idea why. We're just proposing to remove that language, even though that information would be available publicly through a PIA or otherwise.
I think we do know why. Didn't it come in light of the troubles, if you will?
Well, so this, yeah, I mean, so MDOT does a similar report for their executive staff. This includes every single position in the service. So, yeah, you're correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just.
That's all right. No, I mean, I don't know that you got your question answered during the hearing. I think Dr. Glass tried to answer it, but I felt like you were going to ask that again.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm answering your questions effectively.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I think so. So I guess it's a question, Mr. Chair, for this body. I mean, I get that there's two reports, one of which includes the other one. And so there's
Yes.
overlap and there's waste.
With different reporting dates too, so.
Right, right. And so that's a unnecessary burden in my view. I just want to be clear for the subcommittee that there's also other information that was requested as a result of what happened at MES that we're now saying they no longer have to report. And I'm not opining one way or the other. I just want the group to know that that's being taken out.
So let me also point your attention to the removal of the misallocated expenses audit. That piece was put included in the MES Reform Act, and DLS determined that to be a one-time audit. We completed that audit, as Kristen had mentioned. So we're proposing to remove that language. However, if the legislature wants us to continue producing that audit, we will be fine to do that. The language that you're talking about here has been in law for way longer. That was not a product of the MES Reform Act, just to be clear.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're right. I was conflating the two.
Okay.
Yeah, because I do think there was some intent, as I understand it. You know, I understand that DLS interpreted it as a one-time, but I think there was conversation that it's not it wasn't the intent to be one time. So,
and I wanted to make it very clear to the body that if we're proposing to remove the language because DLS basically said it's a one-time audit, so why have it in law? But if you want us to continue doing it, we're happy to continue doing it. We're not challenging that in any way.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to follow on where Delegate Love went. Being in business for a number of years, you know, there's operating budgets, there's audits and things like that that have to be done annually, and I've been enough groups that have had them done on the state and local level. But I do think it's important to go back and for that salary disclosure information be provided to the citizens as open and transparent as we can be, versus having to go back through the PIA process and then it gets stuck in the PIA process. They say, we really don't want to give that out and so on and so forth. And then it just takes time. And this might just be easier just to get it out there, get it out front, and everybody sees what's going on with little to no consternation. That'd be it.
Jeff, any follow-up?
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'm always going to ask if it's appropriate for me to respond. But one of the reasons why this came to my attention during our internal deliberations on writing the bill is that we have, you know, I don't think there are any shining examples, thankfully, yet, but there are situations where, like, what the requirement is for us to disclose salaries for positions. So they're not necessarily tied to an individual person. However, if you know what we put is if there's one position that has a certain salary attached to it, somebody could easily figure out who that person is, and then you know the fear was always going to be that there may be some sort of retribution in some way. Now, I'm thankful that I'm not able to cite any examples of that, but the possibility does exist. And furthermore, just because we don't put it in our annual report, which is really sort of a business document, you know, it shows our business activities throughout the year, doesn't mean it's not available. And it doesn't have to be through a PIA either. It doesn't have to be through that process. It could be otherwise as well. It could be requested by the legislature or whoever else. So that's the only response that I have. But again, these are sort of issues that we identified that are candidates for removal, but happy to, you know, acquiesce on any of these items.
Okay, well, I know Delegate Terraza has her hand up. Before Delegate Aconu, I'm going to suggest we hold this bill, Delegate Morgan, so that we can maybe have conversation with the Appropriations Committee, which is approved it in the form that we have it here, to see how they would feel about this issue. Okay, but Delegate Terraza,
No,
Did you have
that's
any-
good. I just wasn't clear about whether we were lifting some of those requirements after I heard Delegate Love's questions and the answers. So if you're holding it, I can certainly learn more about it offline. I mean, it sounds like we're going to check with the probes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm
let's
fine with
do
that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. And thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Happy to
sure.
answer any other questions as well as we move forward.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Very good. Let's go to House Bill 305, outdoor lighting standards and use of state funds. I just wanted us to discuss what this bill had proposed. As Kristen can discuss, our understanding is the sponsor is working with MDOT on amendments, but I figured, okay, let's discuss where this bill is right now. So Kristen, you want to explain what this bill does in its current posture?
Sure. So the sponsor at the bill hearing submitted amendments to take the responsibility of setting standards. Right now in the bill, it was requiring MDE to set standards. What the sponsor amendments do is they would instead require the Maryland Green Building Council to establish guidelines. Then another piece of the bill which relates to state funds for luminaires. Under existing law, there is restrictions on the purchasing certain luminaires with state funding, and it applies existing restrictions to parks, trails, or highways. And then it also adds a requirement that a luminaire has a correlated light temperature that is less than or equal to 3,000 Kelvin. And both state highways and MACO said that rating is problematic in terms of public safety concerns. And so
There we
where
go.
we stand now is that I know that the sponsor's staff had reached out to me earlier today to say that they had sent amendments to MDOT and that they were under review, and they're having, I think, conversations this week. I don't think anything has been resolved with that issue.
Okay, so we can do a check-in on this bill next week to see if there's been any agreement on amendments, I guess. Any questions about the bill in its current posture? And Kristen, I'm sorry, maybe you said this, but the Green Building Council has said they're okay with being substituted.
Yeah, for the one
For
piece
MDE.
Establishing guidelines, they were fine with how that was drafted. And then they didn't, the separate piece is really where the concerns remain from State Highways and MACO.
Okay. Delegate Love?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be curious to see, and we probably won't have an official one, but a revised fiscal note. I mean, I heard the concern, and there are valid concerns about the woman who the light is coming into her house. She can't sleep, and then the business with the drive-in movie theater, which I want to go to someday because it sounds great. But I was also very concerned about the fiscal note. So hopefully the amendments that the sponsor is working on will lower that fiscal note. Do we have any sense of that?
I think one of the pieces with the fiscal note was requiring the Department of the Environment to set standards when they don't have the expertise. So they were going to have to contract out. So taking it from MDE to DGS or the Green Building Council, I would anticipate that would be reducing the fiscal note on that end. But we haven't received anything.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Ruth?
Thank you. And again, I think my question was just answered, but just to clarify, MDE was unfavorable, but that was because of the situation, and with moving it to the Green Building Council, MDE is okay with it?
I don't think they took a position. I could reach out to them on it. I think their opposition came from the fact that they were being charged with the responsibility for which they really didn't have the expertise to carry out.
Les Knapp is here. Can he?
Yeah, Les, could we ask you with the amendment taking out MDE, is MDE neutral on this?
Yes, with the amendment, MDE would be neutral.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Delegate Guyton?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we're sort of taking the temperature of this bill, this is an issue that we had a few years ago up in North County, and I think there's more to it than just not shining light into people's eyes. I actually think that there was a lot of data presented at that time for dark sky technology, which they said this actually fell under, that it was also better for the animals, and but there were lots of other great reasons to do this. And at the time, we actually got the highway administration to shift a big lighting project that they were doing to that technology. And we didn't see the price tag go up that much. So I just wanted to share that with the group, that was part of something they were willing to do to make the community happier. And the project ended up not being done at all. But we didn't hear much about an increase in a price tag there. So, and I do like the bill. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Good to know about the project. Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do like the bill as well. My question is about the Green Buildings Council. I just don't know enough about it. Is there a cost to that, or does that remove a price tag or just lower a price tag, or how does that work?
Kristen.
Yeah, I don't know that without looking back. I did have some emails from them where they sent some information, and I think they were filing guidance that already exists. So it didn't look like it to be a large undertaking, but I'd have to go back and review what was sent to me, or reach out directly to them.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Kristen, if you could, that'd be great. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you. And I actually did, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to follow up with what Delegate Guyton said, that this is really a super important bill, not just for humans, but for wildlife as well, because it can really, excessive light can really, as I think most of us know, have a huge impact on wildlife, mating and territory and everything else.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions about the bill? Okay, if not, then we'll hopefully pick up discussion next week, and at which point hopefully we'll have proposed amendments, between the sponsor and MDOT have agreed to, and any feedback from DGS and the Green Building Council about cost. All right, let's see. Let's move on to House Bill 457. Kristen, I know you said that there is an amendment, which I guess you've sent out to everyone, to the bill. So could you just, I know we're very familiar with this bill, but just briefly summarize what it does and what the amendment does.
So what the bill does, the bill is, let me get it in front of me. The bill as introduced is identical to what was passed by the committee last year. It requires the Department of the Environment to establish a system to check to track the chain of custody of synthetic turf installed on sports and playing fields in the state. And then it places requirements on custodians of synthetic turf to report certain information back to the department. What the amendment does requires a producer or seller of synthetic turf to, before the sale of the turf, to disclose to a customer the maintenance that is typically performed throughout the lifespan of synthetic turf and the industry standard costs for removing turf, replacing turf, and disposing of turf. And then also to provide, disclose the reporting requirements that are required under the bill.
And is this a sponsor amendment?
Correct. This was this is from the sponsor.
Move the amendment.
I do have one question. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Kristen, so would the disclosure requirements apply at each potential step in the life of the turf?
It applies to the sale.
Okay, so a reseller would, if for some reason it's being sold again, it presumably would apply.
Yeah, a producer or seller of synthetic turf must disclose. Yep.
Okay, Delegate Ruth has moved the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Let's see, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not sure that I have a problem with this amendment, but it does change the scope of this bill. because now it's dealing with the producer and the seller, putting requirements on the producer and the seller. Whereas before, my understanding is that the bill just was, if you remove it, you have to, and you own it, you have to track where it goes. So I do, I guess that's okay. I mean, I don't have a big problem with the amendment, but I think it does do that. And I just wanted to raise that for the committee.
Okay, well, good point. Any further questions or comments about the amendment? Okay, we have a motion for the amendment and a second. All those in favor of Delegate Lehman's amendment, say aye.
Wait,
Aye.
Delegate
Aye.
Logan had his hand up.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, someone has their hand up? I'm sorry.
No.
Did I miss?
No, you're good.
You're good. Okay. Well, I guess all those in favor, raise your hand virtually or actually in person. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Delegate Love, Delegate Foley, Delegate Terrassa, Delegate Guyton.
Ruth.
Okay,
Did you say Delegate Ruth?
yes. Okay, and oppose. Delegate Otto, Delegate Morgan. Okay, amendment passes. The bill is amended.
Move
So-
approval.
Second.
So second. Okay, any further questions about the bill as amended? All right, everyone in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. I assume we had the same distribution of yays and nays as for the amendment, so bill passes as amended. Okay, House Bill 245. I know we talked about this a fair amount past couple of our meetings, and in response to our questions, we did get a follow-up email from Les Knapp with some additional information. So what I want to do, Les, is I'd like you to walk through your memo to us. And then I know there are some folks on the call that would like to speak to at least one of the fees, that is still in the bill, specifically the mining ones. So I'll give them a chance to speak after Les, you have talked. So Les, you want to take things away?
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chair. From last week's subcommittee meeting, there was 5 questions posed to MDE. We responded to these via a memo and 2 attached spreadsheets. I do apologize for the first round. We tried to PDF the spreadsheets and I didn't realize it completely messed up the formatting. So I just sent you the raw spreadsheets in Excel form so that you have them. So the first question regarded was stream restoration, and basically the question was, would the new pay for success contracts or the Conservation Financing Act that the General Assembly passed, would that mean more stream restoration projects would be done by private contracts? And how will that play into incentivizing projects? I think in general, we felt like this does not really create more projects being done by private contracts, and our answer sort of walks through that. Second question also dealt with stream restoration, and that was provide examples of other restoration activities exempt from permitting fees. And we cited a number of others, such as living shorelines, wetland creation projects, agricultural BMPs would all be exempt. Also, basically any other project in which the primary effect is to enhance the state wetlands or water resources would be included. So that could be things like reef balls, invasive species removal, and others. Question 3 dealt with dams, and we were just asked to provide some basic background data on dams, how they're registered, hazard classifications, repair status, etc. So we walked through that issue, provided you some basic information on to answer all of those questions. We also provided a link for our new online dam mapping tool, so you can actually see what dams are in your jurisdictions. That is in the beta, but the link should work and you should be able to use that tool. Questions 4 and 5 dealt with the mining fees. So we were asked to provide a chart showing non-coal mining licensing and permitting fees from neighboring states. That's in the first spreadsheet. And then the second question dealt with a schedule of how the non-coal surface mining licensing and permitting fees affect large and small mines, both with the bill as introduced, the proposal that was also discussed and offered to the subcommittee. And finally, we did include what was our kind of last best offer on the table. So there's 3 options there in that final spreadsheet to look at and compare. And as you move through, the last option does cost us several $100,000 in money, but it did relieve a little bit of pressure on some of the bigger operators, which was a concern raised by those advocates.
Okay, thank you, Les. And before we get to discussion specifically about the mining issue, let's take questions from the subcommittee. Delegate Guyton.
Hi, I feel like I'm always apologizing in this committee because this topic is so new to me and I'm not used to looking at it the way that you've presented it to us and all of these charts. I understood the first 3 questions, but when it came down to those 2 Excel charts that you presented, and how they justified the best offer amendment or not, could you just briefly, because I know everyone's hungry, briefly explain what I should see in those charts and whether it does or does not support the sort of offer that's on the table now?
Yeah, Les?
Sorry, we are looking at one specific issue here, and that is for the permitting fees for these non-coal surface mines. So these are rock quarries, sand pits, etc. Option 1 was what was in the bill, and that would change the fee to $50 per acre and remove an existing $1,000 cap. That is there, and that cap essentially benefits the larger companies at the expense of the smaller companies who would pay proportionally more once you hit that cap. The second option, which is what we discussed and proposed, was a $120 flat fee for 5 acres or less, with a cost of $65 for greater than 5 acres. It's $65 per acre with a $13,000 cap. And for every single mining permit on these charts, you can scroll down and see what the effect would be. And then at the very bottom is the total. We also included charts for the differences, so you could see for, again, every single permit holder of a non-coal surface mining permit, what the effect would be on their annual payment. Next was option 3. This was sort of our last best offer. That would be $120 flat fee for 5 acres or less. For 5 acres or more, $90 per acre, but you have a $7,000 cap. And that essentially, as you can scroll down to the bigger operators towards the bottom of the columns, you can see there that they do, that they ultimately will have some savings because they are kind of topped out on what they can pay. This does, however, cost us money. As you see, we came in with the bill for about $1.4 million, 1.37. We're ending up with that final offer of 1.13. And what our intermediate offer was, and we discussed last week, was option 2, which would give us about 1.3. So that would be a $600,000 loss. We'd talk a little more on the other.
Okay, Les, thank you.
Sorry, a $60,000 loss, my fault.
Okay. And I'm sorry, going back to options 2 and 3, what was the cap on the larger mines again?
So for option 2, it would be a $13,000 cap. So you pay a little less per acre than option 3, but you have a higher cap. For option 3, it would be you pay a little more per acre once you're above that 5 acre threshold. So again, we're still interested in protecting some of the smaller operations. And again, these could be down to a farmer. Some farmers have quarries on their farm, and they would generally be under that 5 acre mark. So that's $90 per acre at a $7,000 cap.
7,000. Okay. Thank you. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Les, for this information. It's very helpful. I have serious concerns about both of the compromise offers. First of all, I'm concerned that it actually, a lot of the small and middle-sized companies are going to end up paying more. And so we're helping the big companies on the backs of the small companies, and that to me seems in reverse of what we should be doing. That both from an economic perspective, but also from an environmental perspective and an MDE perspective, where, and I think I understand from the questions I asked you last week, the bigger the area that's mined, the more environmental impact and the more work MDE is going to have to do to inspect and whatever you have to do on that site to ensure compliance. So to me, both 13,000 and 7,000 seem like a way too low. And also when I look at the other spreadsheet, so I think if I'm understanding this right, so Pennsylvania, it says fees range from 225 to 29,500. So Pennsylvania's top fee is 29,500. Now under your original bill, the top fee is 42,000, which is more than 29,000, but there's really only 3 companies that would pay more than that top fee in Pennsylvania. So in many ways, if I'm understanding these numbers right, we're similar or competitive with Pennsylvania. And in Virginia, it says there's no cap and there's a per acre fee. So I would think potentially that could also be pretty large. I don't see a top fee there. So I do have concerns about both of these offers. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, it seems like Delegate Tarasa always get to you and I say, before I recognize you, I want to ask a question. So sorry, but Les, option 1, remind me, was that an alternative to what's in the bill, or is actually what's in the bill?
Option 1 is what is in the bill as introduced.
As introduced. Okay, thank you. Delegate Tarasa.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of thoughts about this. First of all, can you remind me what it is now? Like, what is the fee now?
Certainly. So give me one moment. For the licensing fee,
cap of 1,000.
it is currently $12 per acre, and there's a $1,000 cap. So the bill, as introduced, would take it to $50 per acre with no cap.
Okay. So what I would say about this is that I share Delegate Ruth's concerns. It seems like this is money that MDE needs to run the program, and it seems like the fiscal note takes a big hit, certainly with option 3, but still a big hit in option 2. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I'm definitely not comfortable with the $7,000 cap. I think 13,000 is still low, but that's just my 2 cents on that. I do have a question about the stream restoration, but I think we should finish this conversation first.
Okay. Okay, anyone else from the committee have a conversation or have a question about Les's memo and specifically about the different mining proposals? Delegate Morgan.
So Les, if I got this right, you say the current rate is $12 per acre to a cap of what?
$1,000.
So that's $80 maybe. 12 times 8 is 960. So that's pretty close. And then you want to raise it to 50. So it's a factor of 4. 12 times 4 is 48. So you're in the ballpark there. But there's no cap at that point in time, if I heard you correctly. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay, so then I look at the compromise in the middle, and I'm trying to figure out, with the mining companies, I'd be willing to, compromise with option 2, which puts you somewhere in the middle of the pack, for lack of a better word. Just my 2 cents worth.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate Morgan. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Les, when we talked last, you said that you had been talking to folks and had given these offers and they still had said no or hadn't responded. I don't remember. Has there been a response? Did they accept one and say, okay, we're good with this?
So we formally offered option 2, and that was declined.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I had promised other folks are on the call, advocates who wanted to talk about the mining issue, chance to do that. So if whoever wants to talk about it could raise their hand, in the raise hand function, and I'll call on you. Okay, Michael Sakata.
How are you doing? Thank you, everyone, obviously, for staying late here. I appreciate, first off, Mike Sakata, representing Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. Our guys are the small, the big, everywhere in between that provides the products for our transportation operations. Traditionally, what these mines are for. I've seen the amendments or the responses Les had provided, but to me, looking at and thank you, MDE, for working, kind of working back and forth through us on this. Ultimately, though, in their 2-page memo, I feel that they're looking for 1.12 million, is what they had stated, just to be clear. And so looking at trying to go back and forth with their numbers, okay, and trying to get them that number. But, the 13-fold, I think the cap right now is $1,000. As a lot of these folks obviously run businesses, right? And you're looking at having a 13x to your business operations. It's pretty unprecedented, and I'm not sure what's been shared with other states. But as far as other states look at disturbed acreage and undisturbed acreage, so a lot of these, like you see on the list, that there's they got hundreds of acres of mine, but in reality, not much of that mine is actually disturbed. Okay, so in Maryland, we don't do disturbed or undisturbed acreage. In other states, a lot of these the renewal fees, by the way, in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, it's about $500. In North Carolina, it's $400. South Carolina, $375, and it's $330 for those. And to me, we're not being competitively priced for the mining operations. And so I would absolutely rethink having that 13x cap on any of these things.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Jerry Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, members of the committee. I know we're all anxious to get down to our dinner. But Mike is my client, Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials. I think he offered the most compelling reasons to take another look at this. Again, my question is, we were told that they had this number in mind and they backed into it with these fees. So my question as a public policy guys, what's the real reason, the need for the money? And we've never heard an answer to that. And we have to say, by the way, our people think the mining operation at MDE is very good and get along great with those folks. But the question remains, what's this money going to be used for? And why they back into the $1 million by juggling these figures?
Les, if you want to, before I call on the other delegates raise their hands, if it's any point you want to have an opportunity for response, you're welcome to. But Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand the point of a 1 to 13 scale is rather high. Would we be willing to compromise with a $10,000 cap in there somehow?
There was an agreement, we thought, on this, and Mike, you can explain what it is.
Yeah, but we kind of agreed on basically lowering the cap is really what the main issue on all these things is. Ultimately, the original proposal had no cap. In running a business, you can't sustain that from year over year. So yeah, absolutely running a cap to me, having a 6,500 cap or $7,000 cap is more equitable to allow them to still get what they need from these increased fees.
Okay, Delegate Love.
Les, when was the last time these fees were raised?
So these fees were last raised, and they have not been increased since 1992.
Thank you.
And we did a calculation, by the way, on the average inflation of 20 whatever years ago. It's almost be that 1,000 would be 2,000 or so. So it's almost double. If there's a logic to that.
Okay, Delegate Ruth. You're on mute. There you
Thank
go.
you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I realized that as soon as I started talking. So I mean, I definitely understand from a business perspective to go from $1,000 to 13,000 or even, you know, the higher amount in the original bill. I certainly understand that that's difficult. But I would really like to hear Les's response to the question of what it's used for. My limited understanding is, well, I'll let Les answer that, but you know, I really like to hear what that's used for. But if we were to go with, for example, option 3 with the $7,000 cap, I'm still concerned that we're basically giving a break to the big companies at the expense of smaller companies who, you know, some of these smaller companies have like 78 acres and they're going to pay $3,000 more. I would assume that 78 acres, you don't have as much of an ability to make a profit as you do with 400 or 850 acres. So 3,000 proportionally for that company with 78 acres is much larger than it would be, you know, for a larger operation, which has much more ability to recover that cost. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but I feel like we're giving a break with this to the big companies with much more ability to make profit. And we're balancing that on the backs of the small companies who don't have as much ability to make profit because they have less acreage.
Okay, Delegate Guyton, and then I'm going to discuss how we're going to move forward on this issue. Go ahead, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think, I don't know if there's an option to come up with number 4 at this point, but we did hear, I think Mr. Sakadas say that they believe that there was an agreement at some point, but we never heard what that agreement was. I don't know if it matters at this moment, but I'm curious to see what they believed the agreement on the table was before these options were put before them.
Yeah, and Mike, I see you've got your hand up before I call on you. What I'd like us to do is MDE in the reprint has proposed a bunch of other amendments. I would like us to move those amendments. And then with respect to the issue of mining, since we don't, you know, we've been talking about a number of different options. I'm going to say, okay, we'll defer the mining issue till next week's meeting. And if anyone wants to introduce an amendment, they're welcome to do that. You know, based on any of the options that Les has proposed, or if you want to talk with Mike, whatever, and then we can resolve that issue next week. Okay.
Move the other amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those.
Mr. Chair, I have a question about how that relates to stream restoration. I still have a question
Okay.
on stream restoration.
Okay.
Unless you want to pull that out as well.
Well, Delegate Truss, is it a specific question that Les could answer?
So I believe what my question was last time is how much they would get if they stopped waiving that fee. I'm concerned that MDE needs the funds to monitor those programs. And I don't see the answer to that, and I would love to see the answer to that.
Les, did you provide an answer last week? I can't remember.
Yes, I did. And that answer was, it would not be a significant amount of money because the general fee would be $750 for a stream restoration project, regardless of its size, is what would be charged, because it's viewed as a non-permanent change, because ultimately it's a restoration project restoring it back. And under the bill, I believe that would increase to $980. So it would be a relatively small amount of money per project.
But the amount's getting waived now, right? So they're not paying, they're paying zero, so it's between zero, it's almost $1,000 per project. And do you have a sense of how many projects there are?
There are several dozen throughout the state and running at any time. I'd have to get you an exact number of how many. It's in the dozens. It's not in like the hundreds, certainly. And so you're not talking even $1 million. I'm fairly, it wouldn't be even $1 million a year. It would be well under that, and probably towards the lower end under 500,000. There's not 500 stream restoration projects occurring throughout the state. So it's probably around, it'd be 100,000 or less. And that's even assuming 100 projects were running. So it's in the big picture more de minimis. I think, again, our concern on that would simply be you're opening a precedent where you're taking a restoration project of all these other types of projects we've noted and applying a fee to one specific type of restoration activity, and that would set a precedent we would be concerned about.
Do these other projects require the same type of monitoring? Or, I mean, I think that's part of our discussion working on the stream restoration legislation, is that there needs to be more monitoring. Do you have another way to fund that monitoring, or you're going to need more money from the General Assembly to do that?
Well, again, depending on the type of monitoring, I know there's been extensive discussions on this issue, but depending on the type of monitoring you're talking about, especially if it's pre or post, $980 won't remotely begin to cover that. But we are working, and I know there's discussions to, alter and update our stream restoration checklist, better capture some of the other concerns, particularly with respect to tree removal for access.
So would MDE consider at the time that if that's the way that legislation goes, at the time that you come up with that alternative checklist, consider fees in terms of, or at least consider the fees? I'm not saying do that, but like, I guess that discussion could be deferred till then, but I don't want it to be said that we decided we shouldn't do that now. But it certainly seems like it should be part of the conversation if you're going to have additional review.
We could certainly, I mean, from MDE's perspective, yes, we could certainly continue to have discussions on this and not view this as a closure on that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Doug and Ruth, just want to mention one thing. Delga Terrasa, I don't think MDE's, unless correct me, your amendments, if we adopt your amendments, they don't deal in any way with this issue, right? It leaves.
Not the amendments, that's correct.
Oh, my apologies.
Right.
Okay.
No,
thank
that's
you.
that's quite all right. But
And I'm fine
I
with the
wouldn't say
amendment.
Delga Terrasa, if you still want to consider the possibility of an amendment, making them non-exempt and specifying a fee, you could propose that next week as well.
Okay, then I'm fine with voting on the amendments, and I'm in favor of them. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Thank you. Delga Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we can wait until after we adopt the amendments, but before we get off, I did want to hear Les's answer to the question of what they need the money for. I don't think we got that.
Okay, all right, well, let's adopt the amendments. All those in favor of MDE's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, amendments passed. We'll hold the bill as amended until next week, so we can consider any other amendments. But Delga Ruth, you say you had a question for Les, and Les, if you want to jump back on.
Certainly. So the question was, excuse me, if the fees were increased on the non-coal surface mining permits and licenses, what is this money going to go for? So it's an estimated, as per the chart, about 1.3 million, and depending on the option, where could be a little less. But particularly with options 1 and 2, that would be 1.3 million. That would be used to basically cover costs of the program for inspections, compliance for all media. The current fee structure covers less than a quarter of the division's costs. There would also, some of that money would also be going towards equipment that would be needed. Accessing mines, obviously you need fairly vigorous off-road vehicles to access some of these mines. So there would be equipment upgrades as well. And again, covering basic personnel costs. Our personnel in the mining division are often on site for many, many hours on different quarry and surface mining sites. And particularly as you get into reclamation, that's also additional time going in.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did you say the current fees cover less than 1/4 of the costs? Is that what you?
That is correct.
Okay. And so at 1.3 roughly, it would cover those costs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. So we're going to end our discussion about HB 245 here. And again, if anyone would like to offer an amendment on the mining issue, please get it to, and Delegate Foley, I'll recognize you in 1 second, please get it to Kristen, I'll say by Tuesday, so it can be circulated. And just as a reminder, option 1, the less discussed, is what is being proposed and would be, if we adopted MDE amendment, that proposed amendment on that issue, as in the bill, that's what it would be. So if anyone wants to propose another fee regime, then please get it to us as an amendment. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we vote on the amendments?
We did.
Okay.
Taking it, yes,
That's
taking the mining.
Separating out the surface mining.
Okay, any questions about status of things? Or that ends the agenda for today. So thanks everyone for a good discussion. Thanks to everyone who joined the call, and we will see you next Wednesday. Thank you. Good night.